All right. Hello, everyone. Guys, can you hear me? Can you see me? If everything is good, please put plus in the chat. That will be great. And let's see. All right. Very cool. Awesome. Great. Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing good. I'm good. Thank you. So let's start. Today is our lesson number 12, I believe. And today we actually are going to talk about interview, and we will go over interview process, and we will start talking about interview questions. And let me actually start by sharing my screen. I hope this time I won't have to uh, re-log in. Okay, you should be able to see my screen now. And let me also share the slides with you, just in case you are curious and want to follow me. Let's see. All right, so I'm gonna just drop the link to the chat for the slide, so you should be able to see that as well. But anyway, you should be also able to see my screen, so let's actually begin. First of all, what we are going to talk about today. Today we are going to talk about interview process overall, and what to expect actually during the interview. So you are ready when time comes. And then we will talk a little bit about each stage of the interview. There are a few stages usually, so you know what to expect from each particular stage. And also, if you have any questions, you will likely have some questions. Feel free to ask me, just drop them into the chat, and I'll be stopping at some after some topics, and just like yesterday, reviewing your questions, and I will try to answer all of them pretty much. So, all right, interview. Let's talk about this first. First of all, pretty much congrats to you guys, because you've made it so far. And actually, this set of lectures that we have, which is devoted to interview, is pretty much the last set of lectures that we have. And it is not as technical as the lectures that we've been doing before. So it's pretty much just going over general topics, refreshing some of the things that you guys have already covered, and basically giving you some more information about what is QA work, how the process in the company is built, so how you can actually describe your day at work and things like this. And also just basically we will try to make you familiar with the interview process as well. Okay, so when you start applying for QA jobs, first of all, don't expect to just apply for one job at a company and get some feedback right away. So that's probably the first thing I want to start with, because as we know, actually, when we apply for a job at IT market, we need to place a lot of resumes, and we need to submit a lot of job applications in order to actually get offer. So how the standard process looks. When you go to the market and try to get a QA job, usually everything starts with just placing a resume. So you go to the website with jobs. It can be Indeed, it can be LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Dice, whatever. You go to those websites, you place your resumes, or maybe it can be even a company's website, and you just go directly to company's career page and apply there. And after that, basically your resume gets to the company, and this company's HR or recruiter will be going through the resumes of people who applied and picking some resumes. After this, if your resumes is selected, you get to the next stage, and then you move to the next stage of interview, which is phone screening. So phone screening is going to be a stage when you will be talking to either HR or recruiter. I will go over the difference a little bit later. And you will be talking on very generic topics such as what is your experience and how familiar are you with some topics that they need? For example, how familiar are you with web testing or mobile testing and so on. After that, if everything works out, there can be one more stage, which is called technical screening or HM screening. HM stands for hiring manager. So it can be just a technical screening or a hiring manager screening. So this is another phone call, or it can be done over Google Hangouts, over Skype, whatever the company is using. And during this stage, you will be talking more on the topics that are more technical. You can expect some questions devoted to test cases, to bug reports, and so on. And if everything works out well, you get invited to the company and you move to the next stage, which is on-site interview. Right, so face-to-face or on-site interview is our last stage, after which you are made an offer, and then basically it's up to you to accept it or not accept it. So quick comment here, technical screening is not the part that will always be there. Sometimes, especially for manual QA engineer jobs, technical screening can be a part of in-person or face-to-face interview. So don't expect this stage to be there all the time. Sometimes it's not, even for very large companies, sometimes it's part of this. Process, but just FYI, it is possible that it is a different stage. So besides this, basically, when going through this process, another thing that you should keep in mind is that companies usually select about 3 to 4 candidates to this stage, to face-to-face interview. So if you make to this stage, if you're making it to on-site or face-to-face interview, that's already great. Already congratulations to you, because basically your chance to get a job is around 30%. Like really, they will be picking between 3-4 people. So your goal is just to be a little bit better than others. And if you made it to this stage with, let's say, 3 or 4 different companies, there is a very high chance that at least one of them will make an offer. So this is already a small victory right here. All right, so now let's continue and let's actually talk about each of the stages in more detail. So the first one is resume placement and actually application. So how to search and how to apply, how to organize your job search. First of all, as I mentioned before, apply to many jobs. From what we see in the market, it actually takes about 200 resume submissions in order to get to the end of the funnel and get 1 or 2 offers at the end. 200 resume submissions is a huge number. It basically means that you will need to apply to around 200 jobs in order to get your offer eventually. Some people are more lucky. I've seen people who applied to 1 job and got their offer, but unfortunately, majority of people, especially those who don't have any connections or advanced networking and just apply for jobs themselves, have to apply to many roles. So when you go to the job searching websites, look for everything that has words. QA engineer, can be manual QA engineer, can be tester. Don't be afraid if this job is mentioning Selenium, even if it has a mention of Selenium, but you read the description and it sounds like a manual testing, you can apply for those jobs as well, but apply to many jobs. If you are hesitating, should you apply to a certain job or not? apply. Why? Because if you don't match, like if it doesn't work, that's okay. They just won't call you, or maybe they will call you and then you decide that, okay, you probably don't have enough skills. That's fine, but that is better than just to miss opportunity because you are hesitating and not sure if you should apply or if you should not. So 200 resumes sounds like a lot, and I usually recommend people to break it in certain like batches. So try to find about like 10 to 15 jobs each day and apply each day for 10 to 15 jobs, something like this. And then after you do it over a few weeks, maybe over a month and a half, you'll get to the point where you will apply to majority of the current openings, and that's going to be your 200 submissions. So because there are a lot of roles and there are a lot of things you can do, a lot of jobs to apply, please try to organize your job search and please keep a track of what jobs you are applying so you don't forget. Because trust me, from my experience, when I apply to different jobs, it's let's say 20th job, I forgot what were the first 5 companies I applied for. So what I usually do, I create an Excel spreadsheet or Google Drive spreadsheet. And onto that Google Drive spreadsheet, I basically put some information. For example, position that I applied, the date when I applied, job description, link to job description if it's available, and the name of the company. So that will allow me to actually keep track of all my applications. And that is very helpful because then when you talk to somebody from this company, you can always go back to that spreadsheet, leave some comments, so the next time you remember. This is very, very helpful. So don't forget to organize your job search and to apply to many jobs. So as I have it here on the slide, try to keep it to 10 to 12 resumes per day. If you can't find all these jobs, like if you simply see that there are not enough jobs, that's okay. Just apply to whatever you see. And then when new jobs appear, you will apply to them as well. I understand it is especially possible like during this few weeks because we've seen that market's been a little bit slower. But the jobs are still there. So couple of common recommendations. When you are applying for jobs, use different websites, right? So don't just check the jobs on LinkedIn. Use LinkedIn, Dice, Indeed, Monster, Glassdoor. Basically, the more you can track, the better. So use different websites. Also, when applying, I would recommend you to apply on Sunday, Monday, until Friday, right? So from starting from Sunday till basically the end of Thursday is a very good period to apply. I would try to avoid applying on Fridays and Saturdays, just as a general recommendation. So give it a break on Fridays and Saturdays. Why? Because on Friday, if you apply on Friday, imagine somebody else will go to the same website and will apply on Saturday or Sunday. So then when HR or recruiter goes to work, their top applications are people who have applied recently. So your application from Friday will be somewhere at the very bottom, and the top ones are going to be people who applied during the weekend. So try to avoid Friday and Saturdays. Do definitely apply on Sundays because that will actually put you up top, and the rest of the weekdays. So historically, we know that November to January and May to June are actually hot seasons for jobs. I'm not sure how it's going to be this May. Hopefully, it will be back all right, and a lot of jobs will pop up again. But historically, we know that a lot of people are actually changing jobs during November to January and May to June seasons. That happens because usually at around November, companies already know the budget for the next year. So they start actively posting jobs, and people who had 1 year contract and it expires in December, for example, they also start looking for jobs. So a lot of jobs pops up at this season. In May and June is basically the same idea, but that is when people who had a 6 months contract start actively looking for next jobs and start changing jobs. So that's why May, June is also popular. And keep on applying. Don't get discouraged. If you don't get a lot of responses, that's totally fine. Just wait a little bit because job hunting is hard. From my personal experience and experience with my own interns or students, if you get 2, maybe even 3 calls back from approximately 20 submissions, that is actually a good rate. That means your resume is attractive, it is good, it attracts attention of HRs and recruiters. So if you apply to 20 jobs and you got, let's say, 2 or 3 calls back, that is actually a pretty good rate. So don't think that if you apply to 10 jobs and nobody called you back, something is wrong. No, it's just the market. You really need to apply to many jobs. Okay, let me quickly look at the questions and then we'll move on. So somebody's asking if employers need somebody with 2-3 years experience, can we still apply? Yes, please do. In fact, we will have the bootcamp at the end of this education, right? So you will have some project, some experience to put on your resume. So definitely apply and just don't be worried. Again, if company understands that you're totally off and you don't match, that's okay. They won't call you back. But maybe they're totally fine with this. So I would still apply. Okay. Another question, will single resume work for different position and different companies? So usually I keep my resume in a couple of versions. So I keep my resume in one version that is better concentrated on web and another version that is more concentrated on mobile testing. So same idea, same experience, everything is the same. It just on one resume, you pull everything related to web a little bit higher on top. So it's like in the summary, in the top of your experience. And in another resume, do the same thing, but for mobile. So if you do it that way, when looking at the job, you can understand what this job particularly would prefer, web or mobile, and you can put a certain resume on that particular for that particular application. So you can tweak it a little bit, like you can adjust your resume a little bit. I mean, don't change things like your experience or whatever, but you can definitely change the description within company in order to outline certain areas that you worked with. So you can actually adjust and tailor your resume for the position a little bit. Okay, and the last question, what state hires more people? Honestly, guys, I don't know. I know that California for us was historically very successful for our school. And also Illinois, particularly Chicago, was very successful as well. So I bet there are a lot of jobs in New York. I bet there are a lot of jobs in Seattle, and I bet there are a lot of jobs in Florida, but I can't exactly name which one is the top one for sure. Okay, let's move on and let's continue. So, oops, sorry. So first stage of our interview. First stage of our interview is phone screening. So you get phone screenings in 2 major ways. So one way is you applied for a position, then HR or recruiter contacts you back and say like, hey, let's schedule a phone call. and then you have a phone screening. Or sometimes you can apply for a position, or maybe you can just post your resume somewhere on a website like on LinkedIn or on Indeed, and a recruiter or HR will find your resume and they can just call you directly. So usually there are no much difference between both options, but if you applied for a position and they like your resume and they want to call you back, they usually schedule it ahead. So you will have like a formal scheduled 30 minutes conversation. If they just randomly call you, it is also possible. Just don't be surprised. Be ready to talk about your experience. And if that's the case, it will be less formal. It can be like about 15 minutes conversation. I personally prefer to schedule calls, and honestly, I don't even answer the calls on my phone if they are from the number that I don't know particularly. Even if they call you and you don't answer, they're definitely going to leave you a voicemail asking to call them back when it's convenient time for you, or they will shoot you an email. So I prefer to actually wait until that, open the email, read job description, and then decide for myself, should I call them back or should I not? Just FYI, if you don't want random calls and if you're not sure how to react to like random people calling you over your phone, that is a valid option as well. So phone screening, usually when you apply for a job, is, as I mentioned, officially scheduled. So HR or recruiter, they're gonna reach out to you. It can be over LinkedIn, it can be over email. Sometimes they can even text you. I've seen a couple of those as well. And they will basically ask you for convenient time to talk and try to schedule something. So the difference between HR and a recruiter, first of all, HR is a person who actually works for the company that he or she is hiring for, right? So if you're talking to an HR person who works for Google and who hires for Google, this HR person will actually be familiar with Google culture, will probably be working somewhere on site in one of the Google offices, and this person will be very interested in a few things. First thing is actually your technical capabilities and technical match for a certain job. And the second thing is this person will be interested in your cultural match. So this person knows the culture of Google. This person probably knows personally the manager of the team they're hiring for. So they will be also looking for a cultural match, and it is extremely important for you to be nice, show nice personality, so they will actually like you, and they will probably be asking you some behavioral questions. We will go over them as well, just don't be surprised, but behavioral questions are likely gonna pop up. So this is HR. Recruiters are a little bit different category. So recruiters will work for a recruiting firm or company, and they will be hiring for another company. So let's say a recruiter that hires for Google will probably be working for a different company, let's say like Talonera or Collabera or whatever. There are a lot of recruiting companies. And they will be working for, basically their goal would be to find somebody who will work eventually for Google, but works through this recruiting firm. So what is important for recruiters? For recruiters, it is critically and very, very important that you will be able to pass the next technical screening and technical interview with Google, right? They don't really care a lot about you as a person and about you as a team player and so on and so on. So what they will be interested is basically how well can you answer the questions that are related to, let's say, test case creation. How likely can you answer the questions that are related to some mobile testing and so on. So when talking to recruiters, be ready to outline the stack you're working with. So for example, mention that you test web, mobile, iOS, and Android, work with some technologies, and so on. So recruiters will mostly be interested in your technical skills rather than your personality. That's the critical difference. Keep this in mind when talking to them so you can actually adjust a little bit. All right. So in both cases, HR or recruiter, the phone screening will be pretty short conversation. As I mentioned, it will be 20 to 30 minutes, and it will follow a certain scenario, most likely. So at first, introduction. So the person who's calling you gonna tell their name, that they are hiring for a certain role. Maybe they will right away tell you a little bit more about the role and about the position itself or about the company. And after that, they will probably ask you to tell them a little bit about yourself. So the first and the most important question for you guys to know is this one. Tell me about yourself. It is the same as tell me about your work experience. And this is the question that would describe your past experience and your familiarity with certain tools. So I know it is a little bit hard to actually come up with a story. So don't worry, at the end of your education, we will actually send you a sample story that you can use and as an example of tell me about yourself question. And you can actually write your own story based on that example. So during phone screening, they will ask you about your past experience. They will also do a short overview of technology you are familiar with, right? So if, let's say, they're hiring a mobile QA engineer to work for Google, most likely they're going to ask you if you're familiar with ADP, if you're familiar with Android testing, and how familiar you are. So don't be surprised, but they will not go deep into the details, right? So they're not going to ask you something like, can you list, I don't know, can you mention an ADB command that would collect the logs, right? Questions like this, not going to come up during the phone screening, but they will definitely ask you something like, are you familiar with ADB commands, right? And your goal here is to sound confident and say that, yes, I work with ADB. We use them for testing on Android, for build installation, uninstall, collecting logs, and so on. Very high level. So another question that they will ask you here is, why are you leaving your current position? This is a behavioral question. We will go over it at, I think, the end of today's lecture. And then they will ask you a couple more behavioral questions, most likely. Plus, they will go over your work status and your questions. So don't be surprised when talking to HR or recruiter, and at the end of the conversation, they will ask you something like, so what is your work authorization, or what is your status, or are you allowed to work in the United States, or what is your visa status? Like all kinds of variation of this question. They just need to confirm that you have work authorization, that you can legally work on the territory of the United States, and that you don't need any additional like sponsorship, visa sponsorship, and so on, right? So that's why they ask you this question. If you have a green card, you tell them that you have a green card. If you have a citizenship, you tell them you have a citizenship. In any way, if you have a work authorization, you tell them that you don't need any visa sponsorship, and you have work authorization, so you allow it to work on the at the United States, and so on. This is important for them just to legally confirm. So this is phone screening, initial one, and as I mentioned, it is very quick. All right, let me quickly look at your questions, and then we'll go to this one. What is the percentage of jobs that are web and mobile? And would some jobs be both or not? So honestly, no idea about the percentage. I personally see more of mobile, but I'm in California. I don't know what's happening somewhere in Seattle or New York or whatever. There are a very high possibility that the job will include web and mobile at the same time, especially if it's a startup. It is very likely that there are going to be both. If it is a larger company, probably it's going to be one or another, but it is also possible that it's going to be both. Okay, cool. Let's see what else. Mm, okay, so again, regarding the experience and just mentioning work experience, we will help you with this after you have after you have the bootcamp with us. We will actually help you with the project that you can mention as your experience, and this will actually work. So you will have something on your resume. Don't worry about this. We will help you to take care of this. And regarding the jobs you would like to apply, you can definitely apply to entry-level positions and junior level positions and even middle level positions. Don't worry, again, you will have the resume with the project that we have mentioned there. So you can basically use that. Don't worry. All right, let's see what else. What we should say how should we answer the question, why are you leaving your current position? We will go over that, I think, either today or tomorrow. So I'm not gonna answer right now, but we will get to that. It's on my list. Okay, and let's see what else. Okay, well, that's pretty much most of the questions. And let's see, I have a couple more pop up. Mhm. Okay. Mhm. All right. So let me answer this couple. Basically, one of the questions is asking regarding job searches. What are some things that are red flags of jobs we should not apply for? So the very, I guess the only red flag I can definitely mention to you, don't go for roles that are telling you automation and then they have automation in the title of the job, right? So if job title is QA automation engineer, don't go for those. It means they definitely want QA automation skills, and the job is likely going to be test automation, not manual QA. Other than that, you can pretty much apply to anything else. So anything that says manual QA, regression QA, tester, QA analyst, QA engineer, QA tester, QA manual tester, even like game QA tester, I've seen those as well. You can apply to all those. There are a lot of those roles. Okay, another one that I actually like is what job position would we apply for if we want to apply to Google or Amazon, and do these two companies have more strict requirements? should be applied to the mid-level positions for these companies? So that is a good question because Google and Amazon, they have a lot of projects, a lot of teams, and a lot of requirements. I've seen some middle-level QA jobs at Amazon that would require coding and that have actually coding a part of their interview. So that is pretty high level, but at the same time, I've also seen QA engineer jobs at Amazon that don't require coding. That is also there. For Google, pretty much all the QA jobs that you see, majority of them are very manual. Like if it says QA engineer, it's just manual QA engineer. So for Google, definitely you can apply to middle level, that's fine. For Amazon, just read job requirements carefully. They usually put some information very carefully under the job requirements. So if Amazon says under job requirements that scripting or coding or some automation is required, Amazon is actually very careful about it. So Amazon's not gonna like it. So I'd say read job description for Amazon to make sure that you are applying for something you are capable of. Amazon is pretty accurate. That's from my personal experience. Okay, cool. So let's move on. The first question that I want to go over today and that I want to show you is actually tell me about yourself. So tell me about yourself, story, or this story, how we call it. Treat this question very, very seriously. So this is the most common question, and this is the question that will pop up pretty much during every stage of your interview. Like you're talking to HR or recruiter over phone, or you're talking to hiring manager, or you're talking to somebody during on-site. Most of these people are going to ask you the same question, which is tell me about yourself, or tell me about your previous work experience, or what is your story, and so on. Those are different variations of the same question. So what they want to hear here is basically your sales pitch about yourself. So definitely mention your experience, that you work with both, for example, web and mobile, that you have some experience with tools such and such, for example, ADB commands, Xcode, Android Studio, browser stack, and so on. You can definitely mention them. Definitely mention that you are familiar with test cases and test documentation, and definitely mention something nice like the fact that you are advocating for quality or would like users to have great user experience. So tell me about yourself. Treat this question very seriously. Prepare for it, and remember that this is basically the most important question. Few tips. As I mentioned, we will send you an example, like sample for this story. So you can write your own, you can adjust, but keep it short. Over 10 minutes is too long, right? You want to keep it short. So you basically give some topics for the next conversation, like for the rest of the discussion. So be short and pretty much like straight to the point. You want to outline your main qualities and show the main things that you know. Another thing that is important here, prepare, right? So when I interview someone over the phone, I can hear when person is actually reading off the paper. So I interview people sometimes. I'm not an HR or recruiter who interviews people 24/7. So think about it this way. If I can distinguish somebody who's reading off the paper versus somebody who's speaking to me just from the top of his or her head, recruiters can definitely distinguish the difference too, right? So when talking about yourself, prepare. Write your story on the paper and then read it a couple times. Read it in front of the mirror, read it in front of your friend or spouse or cat. I personally prefer my cat. Just make somebody actually listen to the story and try to actually talk, right? Just speak this. So when you do it a few times, you will actually remember. So then when you have a phone call with HR or recruiter or whoever, you can just pretty fluently tell the story without like the necessity to read or look somewhere. You won't be so nervous. So definitely prepare, just repeat it a few times, make sure you're ready. If you're super nervous, if you forget things, when talking about myself, sometimes get nervous and forget to mention some things. What you can do is you can just write a few bullets on the piece of paper. Like, for example, mention test documentation, mention tools, mention, let's say, mobile and web experience. And then when you over the phone, just look at this list and make sure you actually cover each of these points, right? This will help you because you will sound like you actually are talking. It doesn't sound like you are reading the text. And at the same time, you will definitely, first of all, feel more confident because you have this list in front of your eyes, but also you'll be able to definitely tell and not miss anything important, right? So please prepare and please spend a lot of time on this. This is really the most important part of the whole interview process. It's right here. So quick question here. Quick comment here. Don't try to learn your story by heart, right? So if you wrote it on a piece of paper and then if you, let's say, read it like 40 times to the point when you remember it by heart, when talking to somebody over the phone, if you're just gonna try to like repeat it by heart, it's also gonna sound a little bit weird. It's gonna sound like, I don't know, like a robot, right? So just keep this in mind and don't forget to make some pauses when you talk about yourself. So you should sound natural, right? You should sound like you are telling a story. Okay, so that is pretty important. Let me quickly look if we have any questions and I'll move to the next one. Okay, that one I can cover a little later. All right, so when talking about yourself, the ideal case actually is also to adjust your story a little bit for the interviewer. So if you are talking to a recruiter or HR, you don't have to be very technical. You can be very, very high level. You can quickly go over the tools. You can quickly go over experience with mobile and web and just some generic information, right? But if you're talking to, let's say, hiring manager or a member of a QA team or somebody technical, in this case, you can actually adjust the story a little bit and be a little bit more detailed about the technical things that you are familiar with, about the technical skills that you have. So for example, if talking about ADB commands, with Recruiter, you can just mention that you are familiar with ADB commands, you know how to use them. If talking about ADB commands with a hiring manager, you can definitely mention something that you are familiar with ADB commands, you are using them for installing the builds, for getting logs from the device, for, I don't know, recording the device screen and so on, right? So you can also give some more examples and get a little bit into more details when you talk with somebody who is more technical. All right. Another cool tip over here is adjust for a job. So if you're talking to somebody and this person hires for a QA that's supposed to test on mobile mostly, definitely concentrate on your mobile experience. Definitely say that you have experience testing mobile, iOS and Android application, and also web. If you are talking to somebody who wants the web testing, in that case, you can just flip it a little bit. So the same sentence, you could just say that you have experience testing web on different platforms, different browsers, and also you have some experience testing on mobile. Same thing here and there, but in one case you stress mobile, in another case you stress web, right? So you can just adjust a little bit. Critical point for this question, and in order to answer it correctly, please don't mention non-relevant experience. So if you are applying for a QA engineering role, there is really no point to mention your previous experience as, for example, a pizza delivery person or previous experience as an accountant, right? Unless this experience is somehow relevant. So for example, if you are applying for a fintech company, you can mention that before QA, I was actually working for banking. That is also relevant. That's okay, but I wouldn't mention even that, right? So when answering tell me about yourself question, concentrate on your QA experience and QA story only. Don't mention that you are, let's say that you moved to the United States from Russia a few years ago, and so on and so on and so on, right? That is not relevant. Just tell them that you are a QA engineer, you have some experience testing mobile web, and blah blah. Go on with the information about QA related field only, right? I know it sounds a little bit ambiguous for some people. Tell me about yourself. Some people feel like they should start talking about their background, country of origin, education, all the previous jobs, but actually you shouldn't, right? To just concentrate on QA experience only. This will be much better. Okay, let's see what else. Yeah, that's basically it. Try not to be boring. Sometimes when you tell a story and you feel like the person on the other side gets a little boring, you probably want to like wrap it a little bit and maybe make our story a little bit shorter. So if it feels like your story goes way too long and the person on the other side of the phone line is bored, maybe shorten your story a little bit, so adjust. Okay, let me quickly look at the questions and then we'll move to the next one. Okay, and this one, phone interview, phone screening with HR or recruiter usually lasts about 20 to 30 minutes. So it depends on the company, but 20 to 30 minutes, usually no longer than that. Okay, so let's continue and let's move to the next one. So the next slide I have here is actually the same funnel that we've just talked about in numbers, right? So as I mentioned, you should apply to a lot of jobs in order to get a lot of responses. So if you have 20 to 30 phone screens, that is actually a good rate. So if you, let's say, apply to 200 jobs, got around 20 phone screens out of them, 20 to 30, that is a good number. If you have significantly less than that number, maybe go back to us or ask us. It is possible that your resume is not written very well. So if you applied for, let's say, 200 jobs and you only got 10 phone screens, it is likely that something is not very well with your resume, right? So always kind of try to like measure yourself according to the numbers on this funnel. So then after the phone screening, Usually the good amount of passing like to the next stage is between 10 to 20 screens, and that is your target for the next one. So if you had, let's say, 20 phone screens, but you are not making it to technical screening, nobody's inviting you to the next stage. Also, contact Max, write us a message, and it means that something is not good at this stage. So we will also probably schedule a phone call with you to make sure that your story and you just sound correct over the phone. Maybe you are saying something incorrect. Just for your background, don't so you have like some ideas when to like concentrate on. Okay, so let's move on, and let's talk about the next thing. So technical screen or hiring management, hiring manager screen. So this stage can be done over the phone. It can also be done over Skype, over Google Hangouts, over Zoom, whatever the company is using. And if you are invited for a technical screen or for hiring manager screen, please be ready to turn on your camera. It will be very awkward if you have a meeting over Google Hangouts and the person who's talking to you has a camera on and you cannot turn your camera on because you are somewhere, I don't know, in a messy environment, or you can't actually show because you're doing something else at the same time, right? So if you have technical screen, keep this in mind. So if you have this interview scheduled, they will actually send you an email with date and time, and they will also let you know if it's going to happen over Google Hangout or over Skype. So like, don't be surprised, like there is going to be, they will definitely let you know ahead, but just in case, keep this in mind that even if it's over Google Hangouts, they can actually ask you to turn on your camera, so be ready. So technical screening or hiring manager screening. First of all, the duration here can be different. Usually I see around 45 minutes, 40 to 45 minutes, but it can also be 30 minutes and it can also be an hour. It really depends on the company here. And usually when you have this kind of interview, the scenario is going to be, first of all, introduction. So they're going to talk about themselves, they're going to talk about their roles, they're going to introduce themselves. Then they will probably tell you a little bit about the role or the company. So just some generic info first. And after that, most likely you're going to get the question, tell me about yourself. So don't be surprised, and you basically need to tell the same story as before during your hiring manager screen, during your HR screen, and just repeat some information about yourself and your past experience. And after this, they will probably go a little bit deeply into the technical part of the role. So if you on your resume have a certain project, and you will, they will definitely ask you about, are you working with web or mobile? They will ask you to tell a little bit more details about this. They will ask you which tools you are using and which tools, give an example of the tool you are using, if possible, right? So don't be surprised such questions. So for example, if somebody is asking you like, do you work with, let's say, cloud testing solutions, you should be able to come up with, for example, browser stack and say like, yeah, I have some experience with browser stack. I can use it in order to test on different on different devices and different browsers. Just connect to that, execute my test case, and that's basically it, right? So be ready to give an example. It is always better when you give examples of using a certain tool than just answering yes or no. Like if they are asking you, have you had any experience working with, for example, TestRail, the good answer would be to say something like, yes, I have. We use TestRail for test management system. We actually create our test cases there. And that's how we track our test cases. Something like this, right? So just give some more information, make your answer a little bit more open. That will sound better. So it is possible here that they will also ask you some theoretical questions about the QA overall and technology that you are using in your current role. So for example, if they see TestRail on your resume, they can ask you, how do you write test cases? So what information do you guys put in a test case, right? They're not gonna ask you what parts must the test case have, but they will say something like, so what information do you put in a test case? It's not going to be like 100% like a theoretical question, more like your experience question, but you should be able to answer that question. For pretty much 90% of these questions, we actually have interview question document that I believe Max has sent out already. And that document will contain the most common questions with the answers. So make sure to go over it. If you can definitely like understand most of the questions, and if you can repeat most of the answers, you should be pretty much good to go. That is a document that we've collected over time. Plus, we also keep on helping our students who are searching for jobs. So we keep on updating that document with more questions that they bring. So definitely look over that document in order to prepare for this part. So don't be surprised, but this is possible that you will be asked something like this. How do you report a bug is a common one. What information you put in a bug report, and so on, right? So a little bit more technical during the stage. Another set of questions here can be about the tools that they would like you to know for this particular position. So for example, if on the job description they mention, let's say, ADB and Android Studio or Xcode, they will definitely ask you questions like, how familiar are you with ADB commands? How familiar are you with Xcode? And you should be able to answer, at least on the very generic level, how familiar you are with a certain tool. Maybe give some example of usage, like let's say if you know some ADB commands, you can mention them here as well. Quick tip over here, it is possible that they will have something on the list that you are not familiar with, which is totally fine, right? So for example, they can have something like Elasticsearch, and they will ask you like, okay, how familiar are you with Elasticsearch, right? If you have no idea what it is, that's okay, right? Don't lie, don't try to like Google it quickly. That's fine, right? Just tell them like, I didn't have any experience working with this technology yet, but I'd like to learn what it is, right? Something like this. That sounds good. If they are mentioning a certain tool that you are kind of familiar, but not really familiar, you can definitely say that you had a little bit of experience with this during school, or maybe you have some generic knowledge, but you really don't know that yet. So in this case, your answer would be something like, I've worked with this in the past, or, I've covered this tool when I was studying QA at school, but I will need to refresh my knowledge, and definitely I would like to learn a little bit more about this tool in order to work with this, right? Something like this will also sound good. Please don't lie and don't tell them that you are familiar with things that you really have no idea about, right? So if they ask you something like how familiar you are with, my example, Elasticsearch, and you really have no idea what it is, and you say like, well, I worked with this in the past a while ago, they can definitely ask you something like, oh, what did you use it for, right? And at this point, you basically are probably going to fail. So don't lie about something. The technology that we've covered during the course is a very good set. It's definitely enough for you guys to get a good solid manual job. If they're asking something additional, it may be nice to have for their job, but it's probably not something that is required or must to have. And moreover, it's probably something that is definitely not popular in the market. So majority of QA engineers whom they're going to be talking to will not have that tool listed as well, which makes it totally fine for them to hire somebody without the knowledge and then teach this person. And at the end of technical screening, there are going to be some time, and they will also go over your questions, right? This is usually the time when you talk to another QA engineer or a team member or a QA manager. So this is your time to actually ask. And I would encourage you to prepare some questions before this screening, so you can actually ask them questions. And this is your time to ask them about job, ask them about team. Don't be shy. Actually, if you ask a few questions, it shows that you are interested and it looks good, right? So you can definitely ask them about the team, like how big is the QA team? What is the structure? Do you guys only test mobile, or do you guys also work with web, unless it was clarified before? Right? You can definitely ask them if, let's say, they test on mobile devices, you can ask them what are supported versions. Do they have a lot of devices in-house? Do they only test on the most popular devices? How do they define which devices to test on? And so on. A lot of questions can be asked here, a lot of questions about the team as well. So don't be shy, ask your questions. Basically try to understand what exactly you will be doing when you get this job. All right, let me look at your questions and then we'll go to the next one. Are recruiters usually technical professionals or not? Usually not, most likely not. So with recruiters, you're probably not going to be talking about details specifically, but hiring managers, they are QA managers, so they are technical. Okay, let's see what else. Do we have to perform our work? I mean, example, I guess, of bug report or test cases during face-to-face stage? No, you don't. So you don't show the work that you've done. You don't outline that, but you can be given an exercise to actually write a bug report or a test case. An exercise can be given to you. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, let's see. Okay. All right, and let's move on. I've seen a few more. I'll try to cover them as well as we go with the next one. So next part is on-site interview or in-person interview. To answer one of the questions that was asked, is it possible that due to coronavirus, this part will be skipped? So from my experience, this part is not skipped. What they are doing right now, they're just replacing in-person interview with remote interviews. So for example, in the past, I would go to the company and have a few hours interview in the company office. Right now, instead of this, they basically schedule it over Google Hangouts or some other tool. So you have a few interviews and you just call and talk to somebody with the camera. This is my experience right now with the virus situation. Okay, so in-person interview and what it is. In-person interview or on-site is basically the last stage. So usually, as I mentioned, the majority of the companies don't not gonna invite a lot of candidates on site. It's usually 2 to 5 people. Usually it's around 3 people, 3 to 4, but it can be 2 to 5, really depends on the company, which means that there are not many candidates, right? So your chance of actually getting a job if you were invited to on-site is very high. So because of this, definitely prepare for your on-site interviews. And don't forget, your goal here is simply to be better than others, right? This is critical. Many people make a pretty standard mistake when they prepare for on-site interviews. They go through lots of theoretical material. They refresh all the knowledge about test cases, how to write them, all the tools they were using, trying to learn, I don't know, a billion of new ADB commands, remember Unix, and so on, and really try to spend a lot of time on the actual technical part. This is good, but on-site is not just technical. On-site, and in many places it is actually about the personality, and it is about your match for a certain team, right? So when preparing for in-person interview or for on-site, please, besides just reading some or refreshing some technical knowledge, also spend some time to go over behavioral question, to repeat a couple more times in front of the mirror or your cat, tell me about yourself story, and just to prepare basically and try to, I guess, try to prepare yourself so you're not crazy worried. Probably the first time you will be, but try to prepare yourself morally because this is important, right? So the idea behind on-sites and like just from my perspective, when we hire people, very often we would prefer hire person with a good personality over the person who is super strong technically but doesn't have a nice personality. The answer why is very simple, because I can actually take the person who has great personality and teach this person how to do some technical things, show the documents, show by example, and just teach the person. But at the same time, I cannot take a person who has a very terrible personality and teach this person how to be a decent human being. That is not possible in majority of the cases, right? So when you are at the on-site, please be nice and don't only concentrate on technical things. Keep in mind that actually your communication and your conversation with people is critical. Your personality is very important, right? So be nice, be polite, smile. That will actually help you much more than knowing, I don't know, extra 10 ADB commands. It's okay if you don't know extra 10 ADB commands. Rather, just be nice. Uh, what is important here to mention? On-site will consist of a few interviews. So most likely your on-site will include a few different people whom you're going to be talking to. It can be 5 people, it can be 4 people, it can be 3. It really depends on the company. So usually, an average on-site will include a conversation with QA manager, with a member or maybe even couple members of a QA team. With one more person, it can be a developer, or it can be a customer success person, and it can also be somebody like a product manager. So somebody who doesn't really related to QA engineering, right? And you should be ready to talk to each and every one of these individuals. So don't be surprised. This is a common practice. A lot of companies will actually have their on-site consist of these few stages. So in order to prepare for the interview, first of all, it is good for you to know whom you're going to be interviewing with and whom you're going to be talking to, right? So usually when your on-site is scheduled, your HR or recruiter will tell you or will send you the list of your interviewers. It's just going to be the list of names, maybe titles, and approximately the time schedule. Like this is this person, this is then this person, and so on. So look them up. Some people, for some reason, are shy and they don't look up people on LinkedIn. But I would recommend you to actually look them up. You are given their names for the reason. So find these people on LinkedIn. Try to understand what these people are doing, and maybe even come up with some questions that you can potentially ask these people. This will actually help you a lot. So for example, let's say you are given the list of interviewers, and among one of them, among this list, you see that one of them is a customer success representative or the member of customer support team, for example. So you can definitely look what this person is doing, and you can definitely prepare some questions. For example, how does customer success interact with QA? What happens if, let's say, your customer reports a bug, and then how does customer success communicates it back to QA and tells QA about it? Like who takes care of it, of this investigation, and so on. You can definitely ask these people questions about customers, like, for example, what are the most common issues your customers complain about, right? Things like this. So prepare. This will be very helpful. Next thing is when preparing for your on-site, get really familiar with the product. This is super important. Majority of the people actually are not familiar with the product. They go to on-sites and they have a very vague understanding of what this product is about, what this product is doing. So if you at least download the product or go, if it's a web page, go to their web and use this product a little bit, you will actually get a huge advantage over people who are not familiar with that at all, because you will show that you are ready, you will show that you made your research, and you will show that you are interested. So definitely get familiar with the product. Read the reviews about the product. So for example, if you go into the company and this company has an application in the App Store, go to the App Store, find this application and read the reviews that users actually put there about this particular product. Why? Because first of all, you can see the good reviews, so you can definitely notice the features that these users like. And then when talking about the product, when mentioning it to whoever you're interviewing with, you can definitely say that like, hey, I played a little bit with your product. This is the feature that I like. I think it's pretty cool. And that's exactly the same that users are saying. though. So it looks like you are actually good. You're on the same page with users. Another quick tip here is that if users aren't happy about something, if users find bugs, they're gonna report these bugs very often in the reviews. So really, they will like write a review and say something like, I can't, like I'm trying to play the session and I can't favorite it, or I'm trying to stop it and the pause button isn't very responsive. You can then go to the application, try to reproduce this bug, or maybe even notice something. Let's say user is saying like, hey, this search functionality isn't very user-friendly, it's hard to navigate. You can open the app, you can check how it looks, understand what the user is talking about. And then when talking during the interview, you can definitely bring it up. You can definitely mention something like, I was using your app, I like it. On the other hand, I did notice that search functionality isn't very user-friendly. It looks like it's a little bit hard to navigate. Or mention a bug that you noticed, right? This will be good because whoever is interviewing you, product manager most likely in this case, will definitely know about these reviews, and they will definitely know about what their users aren't happy about. And if you just bring it up during the interview, it means that you are really good. You found it, you saw it yourself, right? And that will actually look very, very positive. So read the reviews. That's just basically a very, very helpful information right there. Okay, so another thing, as I mentioned, study the interviewers. So look at the LinkedIn, maybe write down some questions. That's okay. Prepare for common questions. So don't forget before on-site to go over, tell me about yourself story, go over some technical questions and behavioral questions. And also prepare your own questions, right? So you definitely don't want to hit the stage when, let's say you have an interview with somebody, and let's say this interviewer is a developer. And for the first 15 minutes, you talk about, let's say, your experience, your familiarity with certain tools or whatever. And then the person who interviews you, for this sake of example, developer, this person doesn't have any more questions for you. So now you have, let's say, another 15 minutes, and you somehow should try to not make it very awkward, right? So if you have questions prepared that you can ask right there, that will be super helpful, because it will like maintain this speech, and this will help you to avoid the stage, right? So better prepare more questions so you can actually use them in case something like this happens. If, let's say, you're interviewing with a developer, and this is, for example, an Android developer, you can definitely ask a lot of questions such as like, so what is the communication between developers and QA? How do you guys interact? What Android devices do you guys support? What Android devices are the most popular for your users? Do you only support mobile, or do you also work with tablet? What versions of Android do you support officially? And how do you go about, like, let's say, retiring or old versions? So for example, we were supporting version 6. Now we don't want to support it anymore. Like, what do we do? How do we notify users and things like this? All right. So prepare a lot of questions, and that will actually help you. Very often, especially if you have an interview with developers, developers don't know what to ask us. Really, they have no idea. They're gonna ask us some pretty generic information on, okay, so what is your past experience? What is your experience with mobile or web? And then they don't know what else to ask. That's just from my past experience. So be ready to actually take over and lead this conversation. This will actually help you, because the last thing you want to happen to you is that developers don't know what to ask, and they decide to ask something super technical because they think that everybody knows it. And now they ask you something like, I don't know, how do you connect to the database, which is like, right? So you don't want this to happen. Usually people just, especially developers, can actually come up with technical questions just to fill out this time, right? So it is much better for you instead to take over and ask this person about the product itself or past experience. There are a set of generic questions, so don't forget, you can use them in case you get lost. Keep on asking questions about the team, keep on asking questions about the company. Like, you can definitely ask somebody like, so how long have you been in this company? What do you like about the company culture? What maybe are the areas that you see you'd prefer to improve in your company's culture? What is the team communication? How often do you guys release new product? And so on, right? So generic questions are also helpful. Keep them in mind. And the last thing here to mention is that when you're going to on-site interviews, print out the resumes. It just shows that you are prepared. Yes, this is a digital world. Probably 99% of people have seen your LinkedIn profile before your interview, or they have your resume on their laptop. But it just looks good when you actually go to the interview and talk to someone and you're like, hey, like, I have extra copy of my resume if you need it. This just looks more professional. I have not seen people with printed out resumes for the last 2 years. Like, the last time I've seen somebody was a director level engineer, and it was about 2 years ago. But it actually looks good. It actually looks professional. So print out your resumes and just bring them to the interview. That will actually help. All right. One last thing. One last thing that I forgot to tell you, but I'd like you to also keep in mind about the on-sites. So as I mentioned, on-site interviews will have a few people. So they will probably have a developer, a member of a QA team, a QA manager. They may have a product manager or a member of a customer success team, and so on. So usually it's a set of people. Can be 4 people, can be 3, can be 5, can be even 6 people. And when interviewing with them, treat each one of them as like a very fresh interview with no background. So what I mean is that, let's say you go to an interview and you have the first person who interviews you, and this person is, for example, a member of a QA team, and you understand this interview doesn't go well. Like, it's a little bit awkward, there is not much of a connection, not a lot of good energy, maybe, I don't know, like maybe you can't answer a few technical questions. And then what I see sometimes is that people, like, they really get discouraged and they get disappointed. They're like, oh, I failed this one. Okay, that's it. Like, I'm done. There is no more point to even try, right? So they really get upset or sad. And then the next interview they have, they already in this like failure state, and it doesn't go well. Then the third one doesn't go well, and the whole thing is eventually ruined, right? So instead, treat each one of these interviews as a new one. So even if the first one wasn't well, like you couldn't answer some technical questions, that's okay. The next person comes in, start with a blank page, talk about yourself, talk about your experience, ask good questions, and so on, right? So try to impress the second person, third person, fourth, and whoever next is there. Why is this important? Because when you have a few people interviewing you, what actually happens on the background is that each person who interviews you provides some sort of the feedback about you. And sometimes it's visible to the rest of the team, sometimes it's only visible to the manager, but they all provide the feedback about you. So let's say you have talked to HR. You passed to the next stage. It means HR has provided a positive feedback. Okay, we have one. Then you talk to a technical manager or a member of a QA team, and you are allowed to join, to go to the on-site. So it means that you have the second positive feedback already. So you have 2 pluses. Now you have on-site, and on-site, let's say, has 4 interviews. If you fail the first one, okay, you failed it, so we have 1 minus, but then you have 3 more to go. So if you have 3 more positive ones, you're gonna have 5 positive feedbacks and 1 negative. Trust me, in 90% of the cases, they're not even gonna look at this 1 negative feedback. They're just gonna let you in and they're gonna hire you. So that's why it's super important during on-site to not get upset if some interview with one member doesn't go well. It's okay. Just the next person, start from the beginning, be positive, be nice. I know it can be a little bit hard, but just try your best because they collect this feedback from everyone, and one failed person, that's okay. Nobody's even gonna care. Probably except the QA manager, right? If you really fail the interview with a QA manager, yeah, that's a pretty sad experience. Maybe they won't want to hire you after this. But if you failed an interview with a developer or a product manager or a customer success representative, nobody gonna care at all. If you failed an interview with, let's say, a member of a QA team, yeah, they're probably gonna look at it, but most likely they're still gonna ignore it, right? So just work for the majority of people and make sure that each of your interviews is basically entered from like this fresh state. So that will actually help you. All right, very cool. Let me see what we have next. Yeah. So before we go to actual interview questions, let me quickly ask, let me quickly answer what you have answered, and then we'll go to the next ones. Okay, let's see. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so a good question about the actual challenge or the actual questions during on-site technical part. So during on-site, you will be talking to QA manager or members of QA team, and it is possible that they just gonna ask you questions and that's it. They won't give you any exercise. At the same time, it is also possible that they will actually ask you to do some sort of an exercise. So for example, they will show you a page. Like I was once shown a YouTube page with a video, and they asked me, can you let me know, like, can you tell me how would you test this page? Like, which test cases would you execute, right? And I would go over the whole page and say, like, video, play, stop, make sure it is working, make sure I can scroll, and make sure I can search. There is a search bar on top, make sure I can see a recommended video, make sure the title is correct, and so on, right? So you can be given an example like this. They will give you a page and say, which test cases would you execute here? A very common question would be like, let's say you are given a login form, which test cases would you execute? How would you test this form, right? So something like this to name test cases. Another question that I've seen a couple times was, they will show you a screenshot with something broken on the page, and they say, for example, this button doesn't work. How would you report a bug, right? And here you would need to either write down or just name them some things like, this is the title, this is the steps to reproduce, I would mention, and this is expected behavior. I would also attach some screenshots and whatever, right? So something like this is possible. But the most common questions are this. They can even give you a mobile build and it will be broken, and they will ask you like, how would you report such a bug, or how would you test this build? So things like this. This is possible. It really depends on the company, but most of the exercise will be around name us the test cases, or write a couple of test cases, and how would you report these bugs? Tell us the bug that you are seeing on a certain page. All right, cool. Let's see what else. For our question, can we ask about do they have initial training in the beginning, and how about do they have probation period? So you can definitely ask something like this. You can ask them if they have onboarding process and how long it is. Just from my experience, I can tell you that usually companies don't expect you to start delivering within the first months. So usually, at least the first months, you are given to just get familiar with the product, with technology, read the documentation before you can start actually actively delivering things. Of course, it varies. If you're working for, let's say, a bigger company, their onboarding period can be up to 3 months. If you're working for a small startup, their onboarding period can be super short, like a week. But usually around a month, nobody expects you to deliver pretty much anything. So you can actually take the time, learn things, and slowly start testing product, report bugs, but like you are not supposed to fully the regression test the whole build by yourself. Nothing like this is gonna happen. All right, which kind of clothes we should wear for on-site interview, casual or business clothes? Yay, great question, actually. I always forget to mention dress code. So for on-site interviews, don't overdress. Keep in mind that this is IT, and IT is very, very casual, right? So look nice, but you can wear casual clothes. Please don't wear ties. Don't wear like jackets. Or like business suits. That is definitely an overkill, and you will be uncomfortable because trust me, majority of people who are going to interview you gonna be wearing jeans and t-shirts. So if you are wearing a tie, you will be very overdressed. Except for the cases when you are applying for a management role, that's probably the only exception. Okay, so don't overdress. For ladies, also, I would usually recommend not to put a lot of bright makeup or not to wear like very tall heels. It's okay if it's small. The nude makeup is also fine, but don't like overdo it, because again, you will likely get into an interview where everybody's super casual, and some of the ladies don't even have makeup at all. And if that's the case, it just will feel a little bit awkward, right? So don't overdress. Jeans are totally fine for majority of the interviews. I would not wear ripped jeans, but something like standard blue or black jeans is totally fine. T-shirts or blouses or shirts are totally fine as well. Right? Just don't overdress. Okay, so let me see what else. How will we know who is going to interview us? Usually you get an email from your HR or recruiter before you're on site, And that will have the schedule. So it's gonna be, for example, 12 to 4. And under the schedule, you're gonna have the person and the time slot. So for example, 12 to 1, this is the name of the person, this is the title. 1 to 2, name of the person and the title. So usually your HR or recruiter will actually send this information to you over email. So you can prepare, this is helpful. Another question, are we expected to take our educational documents and job permit documents for the interview? For the interview, no. Actually, you're not expected to take anything. You can just bring your resumes, or you don't even have to bring even resumes these days at all. You are not going to be asked to provide any information that would confirm your work authorization as well. Only after you get a job offer, that's when the company can actually ask you to provide some confirmation documents about your past education or about your work permit or work authorization. Also, for some interviews in, let's say, like bigger offices or bigger companies, they may ask you to bring your ID, right? So just to confirm your identity, that's okay, but that's basically it. And one more question, do we practice interview with, like, I guess, Job Easy with us? So after you are done with bootcamp, after you prepared your interview questions, after that, you schedule a call with Max, and you will actually practice an interview with Max. So after Max has confirmed that everything is good, you can actually go to the market and search for jobs. So yes, you do with Max. Okay, cool, very cool, great questions actually, thank you. And let's continue. All right, so the next thing that I have for us today are actually a few questions that are common and that we can see sometimes during interview. So we will try to go over them right now. If we don't have enough time, don't worry, we'll just take whatever we have remaining for tomorrow. And tomorrow, we're gonna start with the questions that we didn't cover, plus have another set of questions. And tomorrow, we're also gonna talk about the processes, QA processes in the company overall. All right, so let's start. The question number one is pretty common. The question is, what would you do if you created a bug report and the developer tells you they cannot reproduce it, right? So you found a bug, you reported it to Jira or somewhere, it got assigned to a developer, the developer takes it, tries to reproduce it, and they cannot, so they go back to you and say, like, it's not broken, it's fine, right? So what would you do? The first thing here to do is actually, first of all, try to reproduce the issue yourself one more time, right? So you reported a bug. After a developer comes back to you saying, like, I can't reproduce it, take the device or open the page where you found this bug and reproduce it yourself. Make sure you still see the issue. So it is possible that you no longer see the issue. If that's the case, you can just close it. That's fine. Sometimes people actually fix bugs and that bug got fixed. Just nobody actually marked it in the ticket. That's totally fine. That's okay. Just close the ticket and that's it, right? But then another case is you trying to reproduce this bug and you actually can see it again, right? So you still seeing this issue. If that's the case, it is important to make sure that you and developer are definitely on the same page and that you guys have the same environment and doing the same exact thing. So reproduce the issue yourself. Make sure that you have mentioned the device, the environment in your ticket. Also, you can attach a video of the bug report unless you've done it before to the ticket. And you can send it back to the developer saying that you are still experiencing this issue. This is the device you're using. This is the video. You can also ask developer what environment this developer has, so which device this developer using, which version of OS this developer using, and you have to make sure that it is the same. So if you get to the point where you have the same device as your developer, and still you see the issue and developer doesn't see the issue, try to reinstall the application yourself. Make sure that the issue is still there. If that's still the case, then it's actually time to either meet with developer or to talk with developer and show the developer on actual device that this is the issue that you are getting, and maybe even give this device to your developer. I've personally seen cases when I had the two Samsung Galaxy devices of the same version, and on one device I had a bug, on another one I did not have a bug, right? So if you're hitting something like this, and that's the case, then basically show it to developer, right? So again, in this particular case, first of all, reproduce the issue yourself one more time, make sure it's still there. Update the ticket. If it doesn't include some information like which environment you're on, which steps you're doing, if it doesn't have a video, add those information to the ticket. And also ask the developer which environment this developer has, which device developer has, and so on, to make sure that you are on the same environment. If you're on the same environment and still you are seeing the issue and developer doesn't, then it's time to talk. Then you can actually go to the developer, show the device, and let developer to debug. Okay, so the question number 2, you find a bug, but developer says it's not a bug, it's as designed or it's a feature. What would you do in such a case? So in this case, basically, definitely you need to find the source of truth. So you reported an issue and developer comes back to you and says like, oh, we actually have changed this functionality recently. This is gonna work like this from now on. If this is the case, you can just close this bug. Okay, it's not an issue, but get the link from your developer, the link to documentation, and attach it to the ticket, so you actually make sure that all the next people who will face this issue will see that the documentation got updated and this is actually the change of behavior. Now, another case. You found a bug, your developer says, hey, this is not a bug, but then you can't find any documentation about the actual behavior. So you believe it's an issue. Developer says, no, it's not an issue. If that's the case, basically try to find a source of truth, right? Try to go through the product document and see a product requirement document and see what is in the requirements. Is this documented or not? How it should behave actually. If you can't find product requirement documents, you can look through design document. Maybe there is something in design that actually helps you to understand how it should behave. If you can't find anything, if you can't find any source of truth that tells you who is right and who is wrong, ask a product manager. They will know for sure, and show them the ticket and say like, okay, so is this a bug or is this actually feature or how this was designed, right? If they tell you, hey, this is actually how it's designed, this is the feature, that's okay. Close the ticket, leave a comment. Please leave a comment somewhere saying like, this is not a bug, per my conversation with such and such. This is a product requirements. Or if your product manager actually tells, hey, this is actually a bug, keep your ticket open. And also leave a comment for this developer and say like, hey, per my conversation with this product manager, this is actually an issue, right? So if you find a bug, you believe it's a bug, and developer tells you this is not a bug, you have to find some sort of source of truth that will basically define one way or another, right? It cannot be bug and feature at the same time. It's one or another. So search for product documents. If you can't find the product documents, find the product manager and clarify this. Okay, so the next question. Question number 3. How would you test a toaster, bottle, can, and so on? So this used to be a very popular interview question, at least like 10 years ago. This question now is considered not a good one to ask during interviews, but still you can face it, especially with people who've been in the industry for a while, and they can still ask you this question. So all these questions are pretty much the same. So how would you test a toaster, a bottle, a can, and so on? Your first thing here is actually to clarify if they have any requirements, right? So if you are asked the question, how would you test a toaster? Your first question should be, do I have any requirements, right? And then if the person tells you certain requirements, you can basically go from them. If the person tells you, no, you don't have any requirements, which is most likely going to be the case in 90% of the situations, in this case, you just follow this approach. You start with positive tests, and the most important functional positive tests go first, and then you go to the least important and negative test cases and edge cases and so on. So how would you test a toaster? Do you have any requirements? No. Okay, if you don't have any requirements, let's think about what is the main functionality. My toaster should be able to turn on, toast the bread, turn off. I should be able to set the temperature probably, right? And let's say this toaster should actually toast 2 pieces of bread at the same time, for example. So how would we test? We would start with the most important ones first. So the first thing actually to take a toaster, put some bread in there, turn it on, then wait and make sure that it is actually toasting the bread. Then the second test case, turn it off, make sure that we can turn it off, it stops toasting. Then make sure that we can change the temperature, and the temperature setting actually changes. Make sure if it has a timer, we can change the timer, and the timer is also changes, right? So the positive test cases first. Make sure we can toast 2 pieces of bread at the same time. Make sure we can only toast 1 piece of bread, and it all works, right? So positive test cases first, and then you go to least important ones. So for example, do we have a certain color? Like, should this toaster be a certain color? Probably it should be. So for example, if there is a requirement that it should be blue, we have to make sure that the toaster is blue. Then negative test cases. What if we toast in the bread, it's on, and in the middle of this, we actually unplug the toaster. It should not break, right? So if we plug it back in, it should turn off, and basically when we plug it back in, we should be able to turn it on. So things like this. Negative test cases go to the next one, right? What if we turn it upside down? What's going to happen? That all goes to the end. So the most positive test cases go first. And follow this approach no matter what they ask you, because this question can be very, very different. I've seen questions like, how would you test a chair? How would you test the Golden Gate Bridge? How would you test a can, right? The approach is always the same. Ask if they have requirements. If they don't have requirements, go from most popular cases, positive functional test cases first, to the negative cases. Okay, now the question number 4. what would you do once you find a bug? So when you find a bug, basically a good practice, first of all, to reproduce it. So make sure that you can actually get it on the second time, right? It's still there, it is reproducible. Then go to Jira. If you're not super familiar with the project, make sure that this bug has not been reported before. Just search Jira, make sure it's not reported. And after that, report it, right? Just report the issue. When reporting a bug, I would put basically the most important information there: title, steps to reproduce, the behavior, right? What is expected result, attach my screenshots or the screen recordings, and basically file it in my bug tracking system. So, but don't forget to actually mention that you would reproduce it to make sure it is actually a solid, reproducible bug. Another good thing to mention here, especially if you work with mobile, is to maybe take another mobile device to make sure that this bug is not device specific only, that it also happens on another device. Okay, let's see. And question number 5. How can a tester be sure that a bug has been fixed? This is very simple. Just open the bug ticket, follow steps to reproduce. If after I open the bug ticket and follow steps to reproduce, I no longer see the bug, then the bug is fixed. That's it. Now, question number 6. What is the biggest problem, issue at work, and how you solve it? So this one is a little bit harder. This is a behavioral, more like a behavioral question. And when talking about issues at work or problems that you faced at work, sometimes you are not asked this part. So like they can ask you something like, can you mention a problem or the issue that you faced at work? So even if they are not asking you about how you solved a certain issue, keep in mind that you should still mention a solution, right? So what is the biggest problem or issue that you faced at work? You can mention something like, well, I had to test a couple projects at the same time, and the deadlines were pretty tight. So I had to do a lot of time management and prioritize testing one project over another one. So how did you solve this issue? Through proper prioritization, we figured out which project is most important, so I started testing there. I notified all the stakeholders that I may be a little bit behind, and I kept updating my timeline so everybody was aware of my stage of testing, right? So definitely mention the solution. This question can be very custom, right? It's really what is the biggest problem? The problem can be absolutely different. It really depends on your past experience. But when mentioning any problems, definitely also mention the solution. So it actually shows to your interviewer that the issue got resolved. And that is always good. All right, let me quickly look at your questions and then I'll go to the next ones if we have time. Oops. Let's see. How can we check in Jira that this bug has not been reported before? In Jira, there is a search bar or search functionality. When you have your bootcamp, you can ask one of the teachers to actually show you how search is working with Jira. So they will show you a real example. But basically there is like a search bar. You enter the key words for this issue. For example, submit button doesn't work, right? Or submit button in the search bar, and you see all the latest issues that were reported that mentioning the submit button, and usually you can find it, like especially when you are familiar with the product. You pretty much can find the issues right away just by reading the most relevant descriptions. That's, by the way, why title is so important for bug reports, because just by reading a title of bug report, usually I can understand what the whole issue is about. So simply search and find the tickets. If something looks like it's similar to your issue, open it, read steps to reproduce. If they are the same, then it's the same bug. Okay, cool. So let's move on. The question number 7. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? So this question is pretty straightforward. Just keep in mind that you want to mention something relevant to QA. You definitely want to mention that you would like to grow in QA industry. So you can say something like, I would like to become a senior QA engineer, or maybe I'd like to become a QA lead. Or maybe you can say something like, I'm interested in test automation. I think it's a perspective. I think it's a perspective job as well. So I would learn more test automation, maybe like move more towards that. But definitely mention something that is pretty relevant to you. Try not to mention something super not relevant or vague. Like I had once an interview and I was interviewing somebody and I asked, so what areas would you like to grow? How do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself in, for example, 5 years from now? And the person told me like, probably not in QA. I was thinking more towards like moving to real estate business. That is a legit situation. That is a legit answer. I understand, but this is not what your interviewer would like to hear, right? So try to keep it around QA, even if your goal is different. You don't want to just lose your offer because now the person who's hiring you is not entirely sure, like, how serious are you about your QA job and about your QA career, right? So try to be somewhere around QA. Okay, question number 8. Why did you choose to become a QA engineer? So this is again very it's really like a custom question. It really depends on you. What I hear a lot of people are saying is that because they're interested in IT industry overall, because they have passion for quality. All of these are legit answers. If you have anything that you can mention from the past, for example, like you are interested in engineering, or maybe you have some background in engineering, you can definitely mention that as well here. So think about this question. I'm not going to give you like a good answer here, but for number 8, keep in mind this question and think about your own answer. So it is actually custom for you, and you should sound confident when actually answering this question. I'm not gonna give you a lot of examples because I don't want all of you to have the same answer. So just think about it, but something pretty generic around your interest in IT industry, about your interest in quality, are usually pretty good directions to actually go with. Okay, so we stopped at number 8. Let me see if you have more questions. If we don't, we'll take a question number 9. And if we do, we'll probably just cover that for today and continue with the rest. Let's see. Okay. All right, so I don't see any more questions that are like, I pretty much tried to cover most of them. If I missed something, I guess let me just let me know. But actually, one more thing that I forgot to mention today, as always, is, here we go, and I guess let me spend the last few seconds on this, is actually we have a survey. So let me drop the link to the chat. If you have some time, please rate the lesson. And let me drop it to the chat. Let's see. And I guess let's continue with the rest of the questions tomorrow. So we stopped at question number 8. And tomorrow we will go over this. So we will start with question number 9 and have more questions to actually look into. And if you have more questions or if I missed something today, just bring those questions in tomorrow and we'll make sure to cover them as well. So thanks everyone. I think that's it for today's lesson. As always, we will send you the materials afterwards and you'll get all the videos. Come back tomorrow, please bring more questions, and everyone have a good night. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye, guys.